things, but I'd like to recognize several people. Of course, our sector commanders, Captain Fosdick and his wife Chris, also Melissa Burke, and she's with Master Chief. Captain Rizzo, thanks for coming all the way out from DC. You must really want to get away. Long ways to go. Captain Shaw from D17, thanks for coming out. You know, our former Vice Commandant was here a little while ago, and he's gone. He wasn't really here in any official capacity other than to escort Sheila, who was great. Commodore Jim Vass, Commodore, it's great that you came all the way out for this event. Demonstrates your absolute dedication to the Coast Guard Auxiliary. How about a nice round of applause for that? Let's go easy on the Texas jokes tonight. We don't have to talk about what happens in Texas if Alaska's divided in half. I'd also like to recognize Commodore Maureen Sholey, the Pacific Area Commodore. Maureen is, of course, from Fairbanks, and it's a great honor to have the Area Commodore hail from Alaska. By the way, Maureen, you know, I've been to Fairbanks several times, and I've never seen the Aurora Borealis, you know, which Fairbanks is really famous for. I've been meaning to ask you, what time do they turn on the Northern Lights out there? You let Captain Rizzo know. By the way, Fairbanks must be the hybrid capital of the world. Almost every vehicle up there has an electric plug sticking out of the radiator. Murray's thinking the Admiral is such a chichanko. So enough about me. It's great to see District Commodore Roy Stoddard here this evening. Roy's from Anchorage, where the Iditarod will start a few weeks from now. At least the ceremonial start of the Iditarod. I hope you all know that the Coast Guard sponsors Musher Ken Anderson. He'll have a team. He's from Fox, right outside Fairbanks, and he'll have a team in the Iditarod, so keep a close track on that. Ken finished 4th last year, and he was doing well, pretty well in the Yukon Quest, so we'll see how he ends up finishing up there. So I'll talk a little bit more about that later, at least mushing. But I want to say congratulations to all of our new flotilla commanders and to all of our auxiliaries. And a hearty BZ to all of our award recipients tonight. Thank you. Congratulations. Does everybody know what BZ means? I'm not going to tell you. So another year's gone by the boards, and once again I'd like to thank everyone for their hard work and dedication to making the rivers, lakes, and oceans of Alaska a little bit safer for Alaskans to venture out on. Obviously, a human being's natural habitat is not water, and nowhere is water less of a natural habitat than in Alaska. And despite all that, even though it's hard to believe, people sometimes get complacent around water. And for some of those people, they don't realize they're in trouble until it's too late. As we probably have all done one time or another in Alaska, when you hit the ice and all of a sudden you're sliding down the road backwards, it's a bit too late to wish you'd been driving slower, and now you're just hoping something bad doesn't happen. When the storm hits quicker and harder than you expected, it's a little late to wish you had purchased a life jacket and a knee bird, and now you're just hoping that the boat won't sink as waves splash over the sides. When you're out by yourself and slip and fall overboard on a calm day, it's a little bit late to wish you were wearing that life jacket that you did purchase but forgot to put on. And now you're just hoping that someone's around to pull you in. Despite what Dusty Springfield sang when some of us were a little bit younger, wishing and hoping just doesn't overcome poor preparation. That's why the Coast Guard Auxiliary is so important in Alaska, especially in Alaska where the mountains are higher and waters are colder and critters are bigger and hurricanes are so common that they remain nameless. What a tremendous organization. The Coast Guard Auxiliary sets out a table at the local harbor or at the local rod and gun show or even in the parking lot at Western Auto and offers free, complimentary, without obligation or fear of citation, boating safety checks. What a deal. Trail your boat down to the parking lot at Western Auto and Marine, and polite, dedicated, engaging, distinguished, exceptionally mature folks will check over everything for you and will let you know whether or not you have the required safety gear on board and whether that safety equipment is in operable condition. For free, without obligation. That's incredible. This might be the best deal in Alaska. Put it like this. If the worst happens out on those rivers, lakes, and oceans, that courtesy check, if taken seriously, is priceless. You know, it's darn near impossible to effectively measure things that don't happen, but there is no doubt that the Coast Guard Auxiliary in Alaska has prevented the loss of many, many lives this past year and every year in Alaska. I'd be a rich man if I had a penny for every time someone groused about having to get new safety equipment because the Coast Guard Auxiliary said so. And that safety equipment subsequently saved a life. So thank you, Coast Guard Auxiliary, for doing what you do. 2010 was another great year for the Coast Guard Auxiliary in Alaska. You want proof? Okay, I got proof. You assisted 10 vessels and 84 persons in distress, helped save almost $1 million in property, performed 336 safety patrols, completed over 1,000 vessel safety checks, completed 771 marine dealer visits, conducted 86 commercial fishing vessel and 66 uninspected passenger vessel exams, participated in 69 environmental protection missions, and conducted 27 multiple lesson boating education classes for the public. You also attended 185 public affairs functions and performed 128 member training sessions. Wow. That equates to 57,450 total auxiliary mission hours, 4,298 public affairs hours, 3,002 safety and support patrol hours, and 544 public education class hours. Of the 1,000 vessel safety checks, nearly 78% passed. And I believe directly related, but once again, how do you measure something that does not happen? Last year, there were only 11 recreational boating fatalities in Alaska, a record low for the state. A couple of other important benchmarks. There was an 86% increase in uninspected passenger vessel exams and an 81% increase in marine dealer visits. And finally, there was a 16% increase in qualified coxswains. Very impressive when one looks at all the requirements to qualify as a coxswain. Auxiliarists did many remarkable things during 2010, but I'd especially like to mention that 15 auxiliarists visited 20 Arctic rural communities promoting water and boating safety this year, more than double the outreach activities from the previous year. Auxiliarists also participated in Operation Arctic Crossroads and taught water safety in Kotzebue, Point Hope, Koyuk, Wales, Selwyn, Shishmaref, Kevalina, Shaktuluk, Nome, Gamble, and Savunga. And my personal favorite was the 860-mile round trip along the Yukon River, visiting Stevens Village, Tanana, Galena, Nulato, Caltech, Koyukuk, Ruby, and Rampart. During this trip, 262 children and 70 adults were educated on water safety. And there would have been a lot more adults there, except they were all out at the fishing camps instead of in the villages. But the kids that don't float were the target audience. I patrolled the Bering Sea, North Pacific, and Arctic Oceans, but that was a first for me. Riding the Yukon River with Commodore Sholey and her dedicated group of interior of Alaska Coast Guard auxiliaries. Hint, if you don't like flies and mosquitoes the size of eagles, this trip might not be good for you. Along with conducting water safety training, this trip also commemorated the route of the old revenue cutter Nunivak that patrolled 1,000 miles up the Yukon River during the gold rush days. You know, you have to get history in any of the speeches now that Admiral Papp is There are so many great things that the auxiliary did this year, from Operation Big Lake to Operation Santa Claus. I don't have time to mention them all. But before closing, I will take a moment, as promised, to talk a little bit about Coast Guard history. We sponsored the Iditarod for several reasons, but perhaps the most important is to commemorate one of the most incredible rescues in Coast Guard history, a long-forgotten rescue that held the rapt attention of the entire nation back in 1897. Word had somehow gotten to D.C. that 8 whaling ships with 265 sailors had become trapped in the ice north of Point Barrow. The President directed the Department of Treasury to send a revenue cutter up to save the stranded whalers. The revenue cutter Bear, just back from a Bering Sea patrol, turned around at Seattle and headed back north. Arriving north of Nunivak Island in December, the Bear could go no farther due to ice. The only way to proceed further would be by dog sled over the ice, a near suicidal mission with little probability of success. I'd have loved to have seen the risk assessment on that one. So the Bear's commanding officer, Captain Francis Tuttle, did what all COs of cutters do when the situation appears hopeless. He asked for volunteers from the junior officers. For those of us who have been there, we just knowingly shake our heads. Yes, JOs can be a bit crazy. Where's Allie? Maybe you'll be commandant someday. So Lieutenant Jarvis, and a guy who became commandant much later, Ensign Berthoff, boldly stepped forward, and the rest is history. In one of the most remarkable rescues that mankind has ever known, Jarvis, Berthoff, and Dr. Samuel Call mushed over 1,500 miles along the west and northern coast of Alaska in bitter sub-zero temperatures, hurricane-force winds, and 24 hours of darkness, herding 300 reindeer from Port Clarence to Point Barrow, and eventually rescuing the 265 starving near-death whalers in March of 1898. Now, I'm not equating the Coast Guard auxiliary to those junior officers. I'm saying the auxiliary is more like Captain Francis Tuttle with his impeccable judgment. Like any good, mature, experienced commanding officer, the Coast Guard auxiliary knows when it's time to ask the JOs for volunteers. So I've already gone on too long. Before I wear out my welcome, I'd just like to say thank you. The auxiliarists in the last frontier are the best. The work you do is really important. Be safe, have fun,